Marsha, if I could just direct this one to you first. The question is, surely a basic scientific literacy is vital before people and organisations can understand the issues. Otherwise, sustainability becomes a faith position. Can you comment on that?
Wow. Well, that sounds like a statement, right? A question.
It is, isn't it?
So I'm not sure that I agree entirely. The scientific literacy part can be very off-putting for people. For those of us, and I put myself in that bucket, that are not terribly scientifically inclined and haven't had a science class since high school. And I think there are lots of books and publications that are able to talk about some of these very technical issues in ways that people understand. I don't think many people have trouble understanding climate change, for example, even though there's a plethora of scientific data and trends and details behind it. I think what's most important can be translated into something that people understand. We understand toxicity. I can't pronounce half of the chemicals that I should be worried about, but I can get that they might have negative impacts on me. So we try and steer a little bit away from lots of training on the scientific literacy part, A, because I'm not the best source for providing that, but B, also because it can be a big yawn and a big turnoff. So that would be my response.
Could I chime on this one too, Dan? Because I think it was Marsha's response, but I'd refer viewers to the slide where I showed the beginning, intermediate, and enhanced bit, because I think that, by and large, the science is tricky for people because it's a vast array of different kinds of things that they need to learn if they're going to learn the science. On the other hand, there are some organizations, that if you don't do the science, then you lose credibility as a practitioner. And that's a judgment call. There are sometimes where you really need to bring in the charts, the graphs, the data to make the case, and there are other times when you need to not do that. And as to the reader's or the writer's statement that this is a faith position, well, I don't fully agree, because it's a question. We live in complex societies where we interact with science all the time. For example, in the medical field, and there, many people don't understand, how a swine flu vaccination works, for example. Do they take it on faith that it works? I would say they take it on trust. And so it's a question of whether or not the sources have earned our trust. It's another thing if we stand up and say, the sky is falling, and just believe me. But if we say, listen, we've got some serious scientists who say this, and lots of other people trust them, and you may not get it, but you may understand that if they say it, it's probably something you got to pay attention to. That's a trust-based position rather than faith. So I think it's worth remembering that and moving forward with confidence.
Well put, Alan.
Thank you. Yeah. So I have another question for you, Alan. What do you make of big businesses co-opting sustainability terminology for public relations purposes?
I make of it as a growing trend. It causes me increasing worry as time goes by. But, people have, I wrote an essay once, it's actually in the back of the AtKisson agreement, as an appendix called Sustainability is Dead, Long Live Sustainability. And it was really directed at exactly this, at the co-opting of the language. And one of the parallels I often make is, I wonder if people still remember the democratic republics of Eastern Europe, which were not all democratic, and calling it things sustainable that isn't, that doesn't have a thing to do with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing biodiversity impacts, improving the well-being of human beings. It doesn't, calling a thing doesn't make it so. Misusing the phrase doesn't make the phrase unuseful either. It just means that those of us who do get it have to be very clear in pushing people to use it in appropriate ways. I think we have to be on our guard. This is going to happen increasingly as companies call things sustainable that aren't. And I just urge people on this broadcast to be vigilant and be clear in their own definition.
Dan, I'd like to add something too to what Alan is saying, and I think he's got some of the great tools that will help people fulfill on this. We guide clients not to make claims, but to collect and be transparent about data. so I think it's dangerous to call yourself sustainable or even to call yourself greenhouse neutral or green or any of those terms, but it's pretty safe and I think more honest to be able to say we used to emit 500 tons of greenhouse gas. This year we've got it down to 350. So you make of that of what you will, and I think when you base things in data like that, it's much more honest. It allows people to make their own interpretations, and you can't be accused of greenwashing. You're simply sharing your data. So using tools like Ellen has developed, I think, are very useful for that.
Here, Marsha.
Okay, thank you. And actually, kind of a related question. The practical side of that for smaller businesses, can you recommend a cost-effective way for a small business to measure its carbon footprint in order to get a good baseline measure of where we stand today?
We work a lot with small organizations, and on this one in particular, there is a growing number of fairly simple calculators that are actually available online. We use them in our business. We have 2 people in our business. We don't need a sophisticated greenhouse gas protocol method for what we do. And so I would simply do a quick search. If you're in the U.S., the EPA has one. There are several nonprofits that provide them. We've got one and a tool that we use that, it's just been something that we've pulled together from various sources. So it's not that difficult to do at an informal level. Now, if you're playing the game about reporting, and we might all be playing that game fairly soon, it might be a different story, but certainly for now there are plenty of tools that will give you a basic read on what your emissions are. Do you know of any, Ellen?
Well, I just Googled while you were talking, Marsha, and there were 4.5 million hits on the phrase carbon footprint, and I've also, frankly, personally, not been able to identify the one that I think is best. I tend to use whatever one seems reasonable and from a reasonable source at the time, that particular project. As you were saying, this place, the folks in Australia do their calculations differently, and they should, and compared to the folks in the U.S., and it's just a question of getting a reasonable and credible source for the calculator that you're using.
Yeah, I think if you Google greenhouse gas calculator, you'll get significantly fewer hits, and it might be a little less daunting.